In this video, I'm going to talk about all the reasons why the moon is as radiant as the elephant foot at Chernobyl. However, I also want to touch on many things as to why we are not on and no other nation is going to the moon. If you have not seen my video about why humans are not on the moon 101, I highly suggest you check out my channel and go see that first. Here is a new telescope image taken from the new X-ray gamma telescope that Russia's just launched and have put into the exosphere to measure various external celestial bodies and gamma and X-ray phenomenon.
The gamma ray moon. Believe it or not, the moon shines brighter in gamma rays than the sun does. This is because the ultraviolet, X-ray, and particle output of the sun acts as a shield against high-energy cosmic rays striking its atmosphere. But the moon has no such protection. Cosmic rays strike the surface and produce those gamma signatures.
Russia has always done it first, and Russia has always done it best. This is the new X-ray telescope designed to take video and pictures of gamma ray and X-rays coming from celestial bodies and the outer cosmos. Amazing every time. Roscosmos is the #1 leading engineer for all space rockets. They have made the first, they have made the best. All the ideas that we have used and created our rockets from came from theirs. We have taken their engineers and we are using their systems now. We pay $80 million a seat every 90 days to launch from their lands on their spacecraft to go to the spacecraft that they put to replace the spacecraft they always had there at 230 miles up. In '97, we gave them wheat and some international trade, and they called it an international space station. We've been allowed on. We are now losing the ability to buy those seats, and when they put up the next one, we will not be allowed on. This is the current state of everything. This is the new 5G network. This is the new X-ray telescope. These are the new systems that we are lacking in as we ask them for rides. So while we talk about Space Force and while we talk about all of these amazing new advancements that we're developing, I would like to point out that America has yet to figure out even how to create 5G or communicate in X-rays here.
Once you have people on the surface of Mars and people in the outer planets, you're going to start thinking about how do you call home?
Stop it right there because I want to point out one simple thing. Russia and China are straightforward that these are ways for them to use greater and faster communication means and also to control a greater GPS system at a higher level. So that is them clearly stating what the intent of these machines are for, is for communication at a higher level in our upper atmosphere. That's why they put them there, that's why it's so important, that's why the new telescopes are feeding back what the video started with, and that is the new science talking about gamma X-ray and the potentials that it has on all of the celestial bodies as well as where it comes from and how big and heavy and all of the makeup of what it is. So, as they're talking about all of this, take note that when they go grand with we're going to go on celestial bodies now that we can communicate at such a grand scale, every time we get 230 miles up, we talk about it being the furthest reaches of space. The fact is, the rest of the world knows that it's still within the Earth's atmosphere. Here's where they actually are. Right here. That's where it's communicating to. Because up here, above the International Space Station, which would be like right there, up here in the upper thermosphere, not the lower thermosphere, you need X-ray communication. Communicate with these satellites because they are in a plasmic state. Because 6,213 miles is where the exosphere stops, and when you get into the actual thickness of the bands, the heavy layers of the magnetosphere, not just the 2 Van Allen belts. Remember the other video, there aren't just 2 anymore. That's 1957 studies. It's 2019.
Got a little demo to get us started, so walk me through what we're going to do here.
First, so let me put on the speaker. And we get static.
This is the best that we can do.
The music is turning on. So
It sounds like a really bad record player.
it's a bad record player, right?
So you're transmitting.
So they have figured out how to do this. Meanwhile, Russia, Chinese governments, they are communicating all of their extreme coding and everything that is, well, basic, why they were so afraid for our national security. They have the ability to send anything. And this is what we have figured out. This is why we don't have 5G. This is how slow and lacking we are in space. So while we talk about going to the moon, this is where we're actually at. We couldn't even communicate with things in the exosphere successfully until we figured this technology out.
You would never think that an X-ray can be used to actually send something. So that's really cool.
It's just another form of radiation, just like radio or optical.
Told ya.
Shorter wavelength, and if you can control it, you can do everything you can do.
Been saying it for years. X-ray, gamma, alpha, proton, all of these come into factor when you're trying to leave the Earth's magnetosphere, and all of them affect your neurological and biological
What we
systems.
demonstrated this is that we can control
All biological. They affect your systems in every way.
Just use it. We can do actually much more sophisticated
So
things.
this is sort of the
They
origin
hope.
story.
This is the origin story of what we're doing now.
So how is this, transmitting a song through X-rays relevant to what you're trying to do with X-rays today?
Once you control the X-ray output, you realize you can transmit information. Once you can do that, you can realize the potential of X-rays in a couple ways. One is that the wavelength is really small, so you can direct the X-rays exactly where you want, and on very long distances, that means you spend less power transmitting so many gigabits per second of video from, say, Pluto or Jupiter.
From, say, the thermosphere to the exosphere, the mesosphere to the thermosphere, whichever layer you're jumping up to.
Interesting. If you ever watched the Apollo 13 movie,
Yeah.
where they went around the moon and they're getting ready to re-enter, and there's that moment. It's like 3 minutes.
We'd have to cut through plasma
time where
because, yes, there's that first inner Van Allen belt. Remember the first video? In the first video, the Van Allen belts we showed you, there is not just 2. There's 3. The third one is actually this one that they're cutting through right here. Something we don't like to admit exists, but that Australian physicist proved it exists, and that's why we cut through multiple layers. That's why Orion needs more heat shielding. That's why if we want to go further, we need more heat shielding, because there's another one at 1,000 miles up. There's one at about 80, there's one at 1,000. You have a couple to go through. And so, and they fluctuate, of course. That's why I started with the lower points, and they go up higher, obviously. But these layers you cannot just go through without affecting the matter that you're made of. And sometimes when you're going up slow enough, then it's just the ionization that's being pushed through you that you're dealing with. However, if you come down at a quicker rate, you're going to be blasting through metabolic structures that are just forming out of these heavy ions. So they are unstable, and they are full of free radicals that would be more than willing to share themselves with any carbon willing to bond to it. So that's why this occurs on the re-entry point. However, it will happen twice when we go up higher. So if we're going to need to do it twice, you need twice the heat shielding. Thus why they're working on greater heat shielding than just what we have. Also, you're going to need the greater communication means. So if you are going to be in that plasma state or shooting through 2 different plasma states, you're going to need a greater signal. Now, I've been saying from the beginning, there's nothing on Mars. Everything is in the Atacama deserts, and we're practicing in those heavy radiant environments, low oxygen, heavy radiant, where everything is dead environments. Those are the places we're practicing to eventually send these things when we go to the moon, if we can get autotons and robots to actually make it there. Now this is the first step. Israel did it, and then China did it, and now Russia's doing it, and everybody's working together. Note that Russia used them to do it first. Russia created the technology. So while all of this is occurring, and we're talking about being able to figure out how to shoot our communications to Orion, and remember, Orion's mission failed, we lost contact. Now they can say it's because, the satellite's GPS system, we were just above it, or we were just around a point where the 3 couldn't communicate with it. Whatever their excuses are, which is nonsensical at best, the best thing that they have to show is that it failed, we lost communication, and here is the communications that were required to not lose contact with it. So notice how he said when it went around the moon. He had to stop there because, remember, we have GPS that can communicate with everything on Mars, on everywhere. So we can't use these excuses for much longer. So now it's, oh, plasma states, that's it. Bottom line, everything is in the upper thermosphere, lower exosphere at best, but bottom line, all of our communication satellites are tucked in the lower mesosphere. Now we're shooting them up in the thermo because we figured out this technology. Well, we haven't, but they have, and we're now trying to figure out what they have.
On the edge of your seat.
Right, that's called the radio frequency black depth, because the thing's going at like 20,000 miles an hour. It's heating up the atmosphere that makes this plasma around the spacecraft that the radio waves can't penetrate.
And you're sitting there wondering.
Or when you go too far out in space, like Orion experienced.
Astronauts were expected to come out of blackout as come and gone.
The X-rays will penetrate that plasma. So
See?
Wow.
vehicles that are going at hypersonic speed.
So of course, everybody in this video now is going, oh, well see, that's talking about communication with something going really fast and causing a plasmic state. And so that's not actually like, them talking about it's going to be further up and within plasma. See, there's no plasma up there. Remember all of the videos and lectures that are on my video feed that are from Princeton, Berkeley, and GSI, and UCLA, and all of the sites, all of the places that have confirmed that everything within the Van Allen belts is a plasmic state. And they only are a plasmic state because of the electromagnetic connection points that are recurring that are not just subject to within the Van Allen belts or the magnetosphere, but they are subject to the entirety of everything outside of deep space. The entirety of the sun's magnetosphere and all of the bands reaching all the way out, as they were just saying, pushing away all of the galactic particles that would beam towards us and blocking most of them from us. So it is constantly a plasmic state everywhere outside of our environment. Literally, our atmosphere is the only thing that isn't a plasmic state. So this is what they're talking about. However, they're not going to just say it. They're going to suggest what it is and tell you all about it without explaining why this is more showing we can't go all the way out.
And if you wanted to communicate, to control them, or get information from them as they're going at hypersonic speeds.
Just like Orion, when Orion failed at 3,600 miles, excuse me.
You're going to need technologies to kind of communicate with that home. And I think X-ray communication might be in the cards as how we get the most data back to Earth as we're visiting Pluto and going beyond.
So of course, while NASA and all of our news companies are going off about how we're going to create that technology and we're going to be able to do it and everything is going to be great, we're going to Pluto, a few years we're going to be on Mars, you just wait and see, this technology is leading the future. Here's the reality to all of it.
Huawei had a relationship with North Korea to build their commercial wireless network. Did you comment any concerns?
I know all about it. I know all about Huawei. I know all about 5G, and we're working on it. And we have companies that are now getting very, very strong in that department. I mean, we're going to have 5G. We're going to have the best 5G in the world, just like we have everything else. Our Silicon Valley cannot be competed with. There's nobody that can compete with Silicon Valley.
Team America.
For what we do. And nobody was focused on 5G, but now they are. And we have great companies going into 5G. Even if they don't want it to, a lot of them were very happy doing what they were doing. But now they're going at my request, they're going into 5G. So we don't need
Go America.
anything from anybody.
We don't need anything from anybody.
We'll have to find out. Our relationship with North Korea has been very good. We've really established a good relationship with Kim Jong-un. I have personally. There's no
We're the
rocket
best.
testing, there's no missile testing.
We went to the moon.
We're getting our remains back, we got
Best.
our hostages back, and we have a very,
Making
very
it
good
great
relationship,
again.
the two of us, and that's very important. There's been no nuclear testing.
Making it great
And
again.
what they're doing with 5G will be, we'll have to see. I'll find out.
Who knows, I mean, maybe we'll see it, maybe we won't. Maybe it's all...
Another lie. They put out propaganda, they put out lies. They lie a lot, so we have, there's a lot of proof. It's called, take a look at it on the ocean floor.
Don't you know, our rockets, they fell down there, now we're reusing them, so no proof now, what?
Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins are not heroes, then there are no heroes.
They are heroes. And here's what really bothers me about all of this Trump Nation duck and cover bullshit. is all of the people that went into space, these men who actually flew into space, outer space, where we are now, they're heroes, because not only were they the ones that are doing it like we're doing it now, which those men are fucking heroes, they did it first. They did it with no ability to know if they were coming back. They did it with no safety harnesses. They did it with nothing but just hopes and dreams. And that's why they're the pioneers. They're the real heroes. However, you cannot actually give them the credit that they deserve when you make everything they did a lie. So, that is why you're in this situation.
We honor these men.
Mike
today.
Pence is an evangelical
America
Christian.
will always honor our Apollo astronauts.
He believes the earth is flat. So does Jim Bridenstine. They follow the word of the Bible, which states it. They believe it in every way. These are the men who are in charge of NASA.
Landing men on the moon was by far the hardest thing ever accomplished in human history, similar to the 1960s.
If
We
the earth
too have an opportunity
is flat,
to take a giant
like they
leap
think,
forward for all of humanity.
how can they believe
President Trump
we left
and
it?
Vice President Pence have given us a bold direction as an agency to return to the moon within 5 years and go forward to Mars.
Do you want to know why? They are telling you this for one simple reason. Mike Pence and Jim Bridenstine are flat earthers. They believe in the Bible and that the word of God is true, and he states that the earth is flat and the firmament cannot be penetrated, which they believe is the earth's magnetosphere. Now it's funny that all stories point to you need active shielding to leave Earth. Science, I'm more a fan of listening to that than theology or philosophy. I think it's more apt to use in conversation to discuss reasons why we are where we are. However, this is a simple ploy. They are using us against us. They're trying to say, oh yeah, well if you went to the moon you can go again, and if you can't, God's right. And their Bible is proven true. We can't break their firmament. We can't actually go to the moon. No matter how much money we're given, no matter how much technology we create, we can't do it. And then we will all be forced to acknowledge that we're only in the upper thermosphere at best, if we can get there. Right now, we're in the lower thermosphere, just barely touching it. So, if we actually want to stop them destroying NASA, we have to stop the moon landing propaganda. We need to stop this Christian front from taking down science one last time. This is what we need to progress, and we need it to be called out for what it is. This is propaganda. The moon landing was propaganda. Science has shown where we are and why we are there. And now I'm going to point out exactly why politics are continuously playing a role in this new space race, and why, just like we were tricked into doing the shuttle, and now we're desperately trying to recapture Apollo with our new Orion system to use it like the Soyuz to create Skylab again, but a little bit above the International Space Station because Russia owns that area. Now that we've learned how to control potential communications, ionization through electromagnetic shielding, which is being worked on by Russia, and is my final point of this video, we may be able to exceed the 230-mile mark and be within the upper area. And so we're going to try again like we did in the 70s. And we're in the middle of a space race. The propaganda is necessary to drive the nationalism home to assure that we have a dominant place and we are not left outside or paying a greater cost. So this is us being tricked against ourselves, by ourselves. And the only way to stop hurting ourselves is to acknowledge that we lie. This is progression. Despite its consequences, which I live in Oregon, and we've been having some serious rain the past 2 days now, and as of 2 days ago this was confirmed. I would like to point out that although I might be being seriously affected by it, and my family as well, this is a cause that I am 100% for and would be willing to lose my life and the life of everyone I know around me to progress and continue the progression of. This, while this sounds and has looked like a terrible situation, this is the future. And it's not what everyone thinks. And I would like to point out why this is not what everyone thinks. And despite all of the propaganda given, again, these are shadows, smoke screens designed to make the simple everyday person look the other way. It's the distraction things that the squads are always talking about, things like that. So, this explosion, remember in my other video, the thing that we will need to leave Earth's magnetosphere is a magnetosphere itself. Now, in order to do so, we need to create electromagnetic currents and fields on levels we can't fathom. We need to create power that is rival to the power that is going to be hitting us in order to keep it off of us. So when we go into a place in deep space that is just pure heavy ions, we need to be able to push back with the same amount of electricity per particle and radiate as much as it would radiate us. That's as simple as it is. So, how do you do that? Well, we've been talking about it in multiple fields for many years now, and there's multiple ways it can be done. Most people talk about it when they talk about faster than light travel and anything that has to do with high speed. How can we get to Mars faster? The majority of those videos will explain exactly why. The technology that we're doing right now that's causing these problems is what we've been working towards in theory for many, many years, at least since 2014, for sure for the past couple of 2-3 years. Now, we acknowledged about 6 months ago that NASA published that we need active shielding and confirmed everything that GSI and CERN and all of the universities like Princeton and Berkeley and UCLA have been stating multiple times over. And that was, now it's just becoming a common knowledge and a normal thing understood by the common person, and that is that we need, that, remember my other video, the little lightning yellow bolts that go around the Apollo astronauts. Over the dune buggy on the moon, they need these things in order to go do those things. And so, while we've known this, we've tried to figure out how can we make the power to. And so, while they figured it out, they disguised their trying to figure it out with stories like propulsion. We're going to figure out this ion drive, which is a redistribution of heavy ions, which would be perfect for a plasma state environment. And so you could use that itself to thrust and power itself if you could control the flow of the ionization occurring around you. That plasma, if you could move the plasma, then you could move yourself within the plasma. And so, of course, that was our first idea, followed by, now what if we're outside of it? Now, how could we use all the plasma state that is outside of our magnetosphere, the thicker bit, how could we use that to actually further our ability to get, to a celestial body quicker? And so we started looking and theorizing those potentials. All the way to Bill Nye and the Planetary Society just put out the new solar wind sails on one of those microsats. It's like 30 centimeters by a couple feet, and it's trying to figure out how to use the solar winds within the exosphere to safely navigate that area. Thus, the plasma state we're trying to figure out within the upper atmosphere to control our ability to move without the propulsion systems that we have now, because the oxygen tanks up there, as we saw from Orion's explosions, will ionize, and those the free radicals will cause them to start expanding, and they will inevitably blow out the easiest place, and that's, the valves. And you'll have another Apollo 13 where we're stuck in the upper atmosphere flying around trying to figure out how to launch them down without skipping them off, and we might almost lose men again. And of course, if they go up that high and get lost in that, of course 2 or 3 of them, all of them, might just die from radiation exposure. Even if they get the best treatment for years and years and years, they will inevitably die from the cancer Marco Durante showed that they will get when they go up there without that active shielding. So, when they finally figure out how to use that active shielding and get everything within that area, the best way to make that power to hold the active shielding is a nuclear core. So if you can figure out how to create a micro or miniature nuclear power plant, not for propulsion, but simply for energy properties, to create the energy you would need to create the amount of electricity to put around a hull, say. And so if you have, a lead ball holding all the radiant properties of this isotope from hurting any of the crew that's around it, but that creates enough electricity to power a shield that is on the outer hull of a ship. I know, right? Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek and shit. But bear with me, because this is what we're fucking doing. You'll see it before you die, or at least are trying to make it, because we need it. So, while we're trying to create this electrostatic shielding, active shielding, the Star Trek shielding, a magnetosphere for our ship to keep all of these ions from penetrating and causing the damage that the core as well would be causing. Well, we can use the heavy materials, the passive shielding, within the active shielding to stop these ions, because these are the controlled amount from our isotopes. However, there's the greater amount, but that one small isotope creating the electricity would allow us to create the barrier that doesn't allow those amounts, hitting the barrier of those amounts, to penetrate us. So we'll be safe from the core because of the passive shielding within the active shielding. However, we will not be harmed by the things outside of the active shielding because of the energy that the nuclear core is producing from within the passive shielding. Because of its electromagnetic shielding, it is creating due to the power it creates. So this is what we're doing. That's why it's still a liquid propulsion rocket that they were just testing. That's why they don't have any actual news coming out. And they have to be very secretive about it, because bottom line, this is a technology that the world cannot know about. Why we're creating nuclear propulsion within the crafts that we're going to be sending into space, but not as the power source, as all we've ever talked about is it needs to be the power source to drive our crafts. So they've created active shielding, or in the beginning phases of trying to create active shielding, so that we can push further into the thermosphere and eventually into the exosphere. This is the future. And now, when we talk about politics not being involved, the reason why this is so important is for one simple reason. Politics has been the driving factor of everything having to do from space from day one. If it has to do with space, the military is involved, government militaries are owning everything and in control of everything, and everything political is the lead for everything that they're doing. And I will explain how you're always being shown, no matter what's being talked about and why it has to do with space, whatever you're being shown. So, Donald Trump the other day, a couple days ago when this started happening, started discussing buying Greenland. Do you want to know why he discussed buying Greenland? Well, that brings me to my next point. Greenland is a wonderful place to store all of the things that we want to take to space. It has nothing to do with the titanium deposits, the uranium deposits, any of the oil or rich minerals that we might get from it. They're not using it for fishing. It has nothing to do with commerce. That's why he wants to purchase the land and not purchase the product. So, Phil, that was a staging point for our national aerospace defense programs during the 50s to the 70s, when we were doing the Apollo propaganda, when everything we were doing with the space race was in its prime. And there's a very specific reason for this. Well, if you'll take note that Goddard and JPL, all of our systems in Florida, Texas, California, well, it's really hard to shoot from the equator, to shoot from the center of the planet to get into space. It costs more money and it's more dangerous. There's many more things that can go wrong, and that's a whole nother video for itself. However, take note that if you were to be here, you would have one of the greatest military stronghold positions for launching into space. Now, you'd be able to use the polar cusps as in and out band, like there would be less interference. This is why Russia shoots from Moscow and various places in the peninsula, because they want to be the furthest north that they can. That's why Kazakhstan is one of the greater launch sites for all of the world's technologies. So, we have stationed our greatest national aerospace defense systems in Greenland to stop and help assist with any of the space race losses or any of the military dominance we might lose a stronghold of. Because as Neil Tyson deGrasse stated very clearly on Stephen Colbert and on his talk show, Star Talk, all of the things that he's been on, military dominance is what the space race was about. It wasn't about going to the moon, it was about who has the most equipment, the best equipment, and the men in space. Whoever has the most is the winner of the space race. They own space. So, of course, we sign treaties, but treaties get ignored every day. That's why Japan and China and Russia and all of them just signed a new treaty we weren't a part of, and we're making the Space Force, and they're not a part of it. And treaties get broken every day, and it's always just peace until war breaks out. Well, here we are again. Russia, China, all of them, they own space. We're not even in it. All of that has been blatantly clear over the past few years, while we are losing our stronghold of even purchasing a seat.
Blue Jay has had the benefit of another construction season to bring it up to top fighting trim. Blue Jay will be kept ready for action as long as the threat that drove us to build it exists. We cannot read the minds of those dark and shadowy figures who brood on war and conquest. But perhaps the thought of this colossal air base has caused them to falter in their plans for aggression. Perhaps they have read a different kind of warning in the miracle of Blue Jay, the warning that there is nothing, absolutely nothing, impossible to American resourcefulness, hard work, and plain guts. That there is no problem or enemy, nature or man-made, that this country cannot defeat in its stern resolve to protect its freedom.